But Jesus went to that banquet because Matthew invited him. Matthew didn't get rid of all of his money. He still had a banquet hall. He could still put on a big feast. One other. You undoubtedly will remember the story of Zacchaeus. Jesus said, Zacchaeus, I want to go home with you for dinner today. And out through the crowd they went. This little bitty guy and Jesus. And they got to Zacchaeus' house. And we don't know what happened there, but I can imagine Mrs. Zacchaeus said, I told you not to bring anybody home without telling me before. You know how that goes, guys. But somewhere during the course of that visit, Zacchaeus stood up and said, Jesus, half of everything I got, I give to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody, I'll pay them back 4 times as much. Now, I've heard a lot of people give Zacchaeus a real rough time. But think about it. If he was honest with Jesus, how many people could he have cheated and be able to pay back 4 times as much after he'd given away half of it? Still, you're a mathematician. Figure it out. See, it couldn't be that way. Zacchaeus wasn't all that bad a guy. I don't know how bad a guy or gal you are. All I know is that Jesus says, come to me. Jesus wants us. He wants us to live with him, to work for him, to talk to him, to listen to him. Jesus invites you, come to me. All you who labor and are heavy laden. If you could think a bit about what happened in Jesus' day. Remember, Rome was in control of the country. They had been under the control of the Babylonians and the Persians and everybody else, and now Rome was in control. They didn't have anything extra. They had a difficult time making ends meet. And Jesus said, I know you're weary, but I want you to come to me. And they did. And Jesus says to us today, come to me. He knows what kind of a shape you're in, physically, financially, spiritually, socially. He understands, and he still says to you, come to me. Why? Because Jesus knows that he has what it's going to take for you and me to have a successful life here on this earth, not according to what the IRS says, but according to what God says. Don't let government or society tell you whether you're having a profitable life or not. That's between you and God. When Rome got done collecting taxes, then the temple people came along, the Sadducees. Who built the first temple? Solomon? No. Solomon just signed a paper. He didn't do a thing. David had the materials all brought in, everything was ready to go. He just said, build a temple. How about the temple that Jesus knew? Who built that one? Oh, everybody knows Herod built that one. All Herod did was to sign his John Hancock on the paper, and the people built it. The poor people out over the countryside. After the taxes were collected, then the temple people come out. The people to whom Jesus was speaking that day were hard up. Literally. They were living from hand to mouth. And Jesus said to them, come to me. Come to me because the yoke that I have for you is what? Remember? Easy. I don't think so. I've got 8 translations in my library now. I used to have a lot more than that until we moved out. And I gave my books to the Bethany Theological Seminary. Todd, did you get any of my books? I understand that within 20 minutes, about 10 boxes of books were gone. Oh well. Only one of the Bibles that I have does not use easy. My yoke is easy. Has your responsibility and load that Jesus has given you been easy? I'll have to confess that mine hasn't been. There have been times when it's been mighty difficult to deal with some of the problems that have to be confronted. And even in my own life and some of the dumb things I've done, it's not easy. But I've got one translation that says it in a way that suits me. And Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke fits well." God doesn't expect me to carry or to pull the load or to wear the yoke that was made for you. And God doesn't expect you to wear the yoke that was made for me. God made me in such a way that I could carry the load, could do the work that He has for me. And He has a yoke that you can wear. It'll fit you. And you can put your shoulder to it. Gotta do one more illustration. That clock just keeps us spinning. I believe that Jesus came from a house full of kids. Now, I know my Roman Catholic brothers and sisters don't agree with that. They say Mary was a perpetual virgin. She didn't have any more kids, and she married Joseph, and Joseph brought a whole house full of kids along with him. I don't believe that for a minute. I think Joseph and Mary had a family. Joseph was the daddy, and Mary was the mama. You don't have to believe that if you don't want to, but I do. Can you imagine how a mother would take care of a house full of kids? How many kids were there? Anybody know? Well, you check out Matthew 13 and believe exactly what it says. There were at least 6 other kids besides Jesus. And they didn't even have a television to watch. I can imagine that Joseph came to Mary one day and said, "Honey, I'm going to take Jesus with me out to the workshop today. He needs to be learning some of these things." And he took Jesus out to the workshop with him. And he gave Jesus a mallet and a chisel and a saw. And they started working out there. And I can imagine that Joseph taught Jesus how to make a bench so that he and his brothers could have a place to sit when they ate their supper that night. I can imagine that Joseph showed Jesus how to build a shelf so Mama could put some of her things up on the shelf so the kids didn't tumble over them all the time. I can imagine that one day a neighbor came by and said, "Hey, Joe, I need a new door on my house. Could you make me one?" And Joe says, "Sure we can." "Oh, we can?" "Yes." And so Joseph and Jesus go down and they get their craftsman 25-foot, 3/4 inch wide retractable tape out and measure that door up, and he builds him one. And I can imagine that sometime later the farmer came in and said, "Hey Joe, I got you a new yoke of oxen. Could you make me a yoke?" And Joe said, "Sure we can." And so they go out and they measure that yoke of oxen because every ox is different. I can imagine that Joseph felt the ox's neck, so he knew how to make that yoke fit. And when he got it done, he took it back and put it on that team of oxen, and that yoke fit perfectly. You can wear it all day without galling. And that's what I believe Jesus does for you and me. Jesus has made a yoke for you and Jesus. A yoke doesn't do any good with one ox. Gotta have 2. A yoke doesn't do any good for you if you don't have somebody on the other end of it. And I challenge you to let Jesus be on the other end, to help you with every burden, every load, every task that you have to do. Let Jesus be there to help pull that load, to solve that problem, to work through that crisis. Jesus said, "Come to me. I'll give you a yoke that fits you." The yoke that he wants me to carry, to pull with, wasn't made for Si or Phil or Dean or anybody else. It was made for me and Jesus. Let him go with you this week. Let him carry his share of the load, and you be willing to carry your share. May the good Lord bless.